we received the confirmation from Admiral Paparo himself. He said that this will still be the biggest Balikatan exercise despite the war going on in Middle East.
Come on, up, look.
81 years ago, more than 500,000 Japanese soldiers invaded the Philippines. They bombed Manila. They marched through Bataan. They occupied the islands for nearly 4 years. And by the time it was over, around 500,000 Filipino civilians were dead. The Battle of Manila alone killed 100,000 people, making it one of the most devastating urban battles in the entire Second World War. Now here is what is happening today. Japanese combat troops carrying weapons are about to step onto Philippine soil again. Not as occupiers, not as enemies, but as allies, for the first time since the end of World War II. And if that does not make you stop and think about how dramatically the world is changing right now, nothing will. But this is not just a symbolic handshake between former enemies. This is a direct military response to one country, China, whose navy has now pushed past the first island chain, past the second island chain, and whose aircraft carriers were spotted launching fighter jets near Iwo Jima itself, the same island where nearly 6,000 American Marines died fighting Japan in 1945. So the question is, what has China done that is so threatening that two countries with one of the most painful shared histories on Earth have decided we must stand together now? And more importantly, what does this tell us about where the world is heading? That is what we are going to break down today. Every layer, every detail, every angle that the mainstream media is not connecting for you. Before we go deep into this, if you are the kind of person who wants to understand the geopolitical chess moves happening in the Indo-Pacific before they hit the headlines, this is the channel for you. We break down what is really happening in the South China Sea, Philippine, defense, and global security every single week. So if you have not already, hit that subscribe button, turn on the bell, and let me ask you a question in the comments. Do you think Japan sending combat troops to the Philippines is a smart defensive move, or is it a dangerous provocation that could push China into conflict? Drop your answer below. I genuinely want to know what you think. Let us get into it. Here is the picture as it stands today, in April 2026. In exactly 14 days, on April 20th, the largest joint military exercise in Indo-Pacific. History is about to begin. It is called Balikatan 2026. Balikatan. That is a Filipino word. It means shoulder to shoulder. And this year, it is not just the Philippines and the United States standing shoulder to shoulder. For the first time ever, Japan is sending several hundred self-defense forces troops, armed, combat-capable troops, to participate directly in defensive military operations on Philippine territory. Let me say that again so it sinks in. Japan is sending armed soldiers to the Philippines for the first time since 1945.
We received the confirmation from Admiral Paparo himself. He said that this will still be the biggest Balikatan exercise despite the war going on in Middle East.
General Romeo Bronner Jr., the chief of the armed forces of the Philippines, confirmed it publicly. He said, and I am paraphrasing here, that Japan has moved from being observers in previous years to actively deploying combat troops. He estimated up to 1,000 Japanese soldiers could be on Philippine soil. And he added something remarkable. He said, from being on opposing sides in the past, we are now working together as partners. Think about the weight of that statement. The last time Japanese combat forces were in the Philippines, they were fighting against Filipinos. The Bataan Death March, the Battle of Corregidor, the destruction of Manila. These are wounds that have not fully healed even after 80 years. And yet, here they are, standing together. But it goes beyond Japan. Balikatan 2026 will also feature Australian forces, French warships, including an amphibious assault ship and a frigate from France's Jeanne d'Arc mission, and observers from multiple NATO countries. The exercises will span across the Philippine archipelago, from Luzon in the north to disputed waters in the west, and will include live fire drills, amphibious operations, cyber defense exercises, and for the first time, space-related military operations.
Detected holding point, 14 left.
The armed forces of the Philippines chief also revealed something critical. He said the exercises will draw heavily from lessons learned in two active conflicts, the Russia-Ukraine war and the United States war with Iran. Specifically, the importance of cyber warfare, the ability to disable radar systems, knock out command centers, and paralyze enemy communications before a single shot is fired. Admiral Samuel Paparo, the commander of U.S. Indo-Pacific Command, personally confirmed that despite America's ongoing military operations in the Middle East against Iran, the scale of Balikatan 2026 will not be reduced by a single unit. He said this will be the biggest Balikatan in history, period. And that should tell you something. When the most powerful military in the world is fighting a war in the Middle East and still says, we are not pulling a single soldier out of the Pacific, that means the Pacific is where the real long-term game is being played. So, what is behind all of this? To understand that, we need to go back in time. On December 8, 1941, just 10 hours after the attack on Pearl Harbor, Japan launched its invasion of the Philippines. More than 500,000 Japanese soldiers would eventually serve in the Philippine campaign. Manila fell in January 1942. The American and Filipino forces retreated to Bataan, where they fought desperately for 3 months with almost no food, no medicine, and no reinforcements. General Douglas MacArthur promised help was coming. It never did. When Bataan fell in April 1942, roughly 75,000 American and Filipino prisoners of war were forced on a brutal 65-mile march to their prison camp. Thousands died along the way, beaten, bayoneted, shot, beheaded by their captors. The world would come to know it as the Bataan Death March. The Japanese occupation lasted until 1945. When the liberation of Manila finally came, the Japanese garrison fought to the death. They massacred civilians. The Battle of Manila reduced the city to rubble and killed an estimated 100,000 people. It was one of the deadliest urban battles of the entire war, mentioned alongside Stalingrad and Warsaw. By the end of the war, approximately 500,000 Filipino civilians had perished under Japanese occupation. So when we say Japan is now sending armed troops back to the Philippines, understand the historical gravity of that sentence. This is not a minor diplomatic development. This is two nations choosing to set aside one of the most painful chapters of the 20th century because they see a threat so serious that the wounds of the past must be put aside. And what makes this moment even more extraordinary is how it happened. The legal foundation was laid in July 2024 when Japan and the Philippines signed the Reciprocal Access Agreement, a defense pact that simplifies the process of deploying troops and equipment between the two countries. The Philippines became only the third country in the world to sign such an agreement with Japan, after Australia and the United Kingdom. That agreement entered into force on September 11, 2025. It was built on top of years of quiet cooperation. Japan has become one of the Philippines' most trusted partners, providing Coast Guard vessels, radar systems, and official security assistance. Public opinion polls show Japan enjoying remarkably high levels of trust among Filipinos, something that would have been unthinkable just a few decades ago. But here is the thing about trust. It is not built in good times. It is built when both sides look at the same threat and decide, we need each other. And that threat has a name. Japan is not just sending soldiers to Balikatan. What Japan is doing right now is far bigger than one exercise. On April 5th, 2026, literally yesterday as I am recording this, Japan's defense minister, Shinjiro Koizumi, stood on the island of Iwo Jima, the same Iwo Jima where nearly 6,000 American Marines and nearly 20,000 Japanese soldiers died in one of the bloodiest battles of World War II. And from that sacred ground, he made a stunning admission. Japan, the third largest economy in the world, a country that spends billions on defense, just admitted that it has a gaping hole in its own security on its Pacific side. They are planning to build port facilities capable of handling large military vessels. They are considering installing floating piers to bring in construction materials. And here is a detail that is genuinely remarkable. Japan is looking at establishing an air defense identification zone over the Ogasawara Islands, where no such zone has existed since the end of World War II. That means for the first time in 81 years, Japan would formally monitor and control the airspace over these Pacific islands. Why? Because in June 2025, something happened that shook the Japanese defense establishment to its core. China's aircraft carrier Liaoning was spotted operating east of Iwo Jima, conducting F-fighter jet takeoffs and landings in the waters between Japan's remote islands. This was the first time any Chinese aircraft carrier had crossed the second island chain. And it did not come alone. China deployed both the Liaoning and the Shandong simultaneously in the Western Pacific. Another first. Japan's defense ministry tracked close to 520 takeoffs and landings across both carriers during that deployment. This is not hypothetical. This is happening right now. But Japan is not doing this alone. And the coalition forming around the Philippines is something Beijing never expected. Let me walk you through who is showing up in the Philippines right now. Because this is not just a US-Japan story. This is a global response. The United States remains the backbone. Washington has approved more than 500 joint military activities with the Philippines for 2026 alone. That is more than one per day. It is the most in the history of the alliance. And the US is not just sending troops, it is deploying some of its most advanced weapon systems. The Typhoon Mid-Range Capability Missile System, a ground-based launcher capable of firing Tomahawk cruise missiles with a range exceeding 1,600 kilometers, has been stationed in northern Luzon since 2024. From that position, those missiles can reach deep into southern China, covering major People's Liberation Army facilities and key maritime corridors across the entire South China Sea. The U.S. also deployed the Navy Marine Expeditionary Ship Interdiction System, an anti-ship missile system to Batan Island in Batanes, the northernmost Philippine province, directly facing the Bashi Channel. That channel is the critical waterway separating the Philippines from Taiwan, and it does not stop at missiles. A US-led group of 16 nations called the Partnership for Indo-Pacific Industrial Resilience has agreed to explore building an ammunition assembly and production facility right in the Philippines. When asked about this, China's foreign ministry spokesperson issued a warning. He said, and I paraphrase, that if the Philippines is willing to become a powder keg and ammunition depot, it will only backfire on itself. That is how seriously Beijing is taking this. Now France. The French Navy is deploying its largest Balikatan contingent to date through the Jeanne d'Arc training mission, including the amphibious assault ship Dixmude and the frigate Aconite. Last year, France deployed the Charles de Gaulle Carrier Strike Group for a joint patrol with the Philippines in the South China Sea, the first of its kind between Paris and Manila. France has also committed to providing 40 patrol vessels to the Philippine Coast Guard and is building a shipyard in the Philippines to construct half of them locally. Australia is expanding its role. Canada signed a defense cooperation agreement with the Philippines. The United Kingdom has a reciprocal access agreement with Japan. South Korea is watching closely. And here is what makes this coalition different from anything we have seen before. This is not just America and its allies doing exercises for show. This is an integrated military architecture being built in real time with forward-deployed missiles, ammunition production facilities, reciprocal troop access agreements, and shared intelligence networks, all centered on one geographic reality: the South China Sea and the Taiwan Strait. The question that everyone is asking but few are answering honestly is, why now? What has China done that has triggered this unprecedented response? To understand why this is happening now, you need to understand the three-front pressure campaign that China has been running. Front 1, Scarborough Shoal and the West Philippine Sea. In March 2026 alone, a Chinese frigate nearly rammed the Philippine Navy's BRP Benguet near Pag-asa Island. In 2025, Chinese vessels used high-pressure water cannons and physically rammed Filipino fishing boats at Thitu Island. Front 2, Island Building. China's dredging fleet, 22 vessels strong, is constructing what could become the largest artificial island in the entire South China Sea at Antelope Reef in the Paracels. This is China's biggest island building operation since 2017. The island is positioned for a potential military runway. Front 3, the Pacific Push. As I mentioned, China sailed 2 aircraft carriers past the second island chain for the first time in June 2025. This was not a one-off. It is part of a deliberate strategy to project power deeper into the Pacific, toward Guam, toward the sea lanes that connect Asia to North America, and toward the very islands where the United States and Japan fought each other 80 years ago. Now layer on top of this the global picture. The United States is currently fighting a war with Iran. Operation Epic Fury has seen Tomahawk strikes launched from Navy destroyers. Carrier strike groups have been redirected to the Middle East. Beijing is watching. And every time American attention shifts westward, toward Iran, toward the Middle East, China has historically used that window to advance its position in the Pacific. It happened during the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, when China quietly built artificial islands in the South China Sea while the world was not watching. And there are real concerns it could happen again. This is precisely why the United States, Japan, the Philippines, Australia, France, and others are building this coalition now, not tomorrow, not after the Iran situation stabilizes. Now, because if there is one lesson that history teaches about the Indo-Pacific, it is this: the window of opportunity does not open twice. If you are still watching, you are exactly the audience this channel is built for. The kind of person who wants to see the full picture, not just the headlines. We put these deep dives together every week, covering the South China Sea, Philippine, defense, and the real geopolitical moves that are shaping our world. If you got value from this, hit subscribe, share this with someone who needs to see it, and leave a comment, because I read every single one. Now let me take you to where all of this is heading. Here is the honest truth. We are entering the most volatile period in Indo-Pacific security since the end of the Cold War, possibly since World War II. The pieces on the board are moving faster than at any point in recent memory. Japan is rearming, not in secret, not reluctantly, openly, deliberately, and with the explicit acknowledgement that the threat environment has fundamentally changed. Japan is revising its 3 core security documents: the National Security Strategy, the National Defense Strategy, and the Defense Build-Up Program, all by the end of this year. The Pacific will be a central pillar. The Philippines is transforming from a lightly armed archipelago into a frontline node of the first island chain defense network. With Typhoon missiles on Luzon, anti-ship systems in Batanes, a planned ammunition factory, and the largest array of allied military exercises in its history, Manila is becoming the most strategically significant U.S. ally in Southeast Asia. The expanding trilateral cooperation between Washington, Tokyo, and Manila, the growing involvement of France, Australia, Canada, and the UK. These are not temporary arrangements. These are structural shifts in the global security architecture. But here's what keeps defense planners awake at night. China's strategy is not irrational. From Beijing's perspective, every missile deployed to the Philippines, every Japanese soldier landing in Luzon, every French frigate sailing through the South China Sea, all of this confirms what Chinese leaders have long feared, that the United States is building a ring of containment around China, designed to strangle its rise. And when a great power feels cornered, history tells us that miscalculation becomes the greatest danger. Not deliberate war, miscalculation. A Chinese frigate locks fire control radar on a Philippine vessel. A Japanese fighter scrambles too close to a Chinese carrier. An accidental collision in contested waters. One wrong move, one moment of panic, one commander who decides to escalate rather than de-escalate. And you have a crisis that could draw in nuclear-armed powers. That is the stakes. That is why Balikatan 2026 matters. That is why Japan is sending combat troops to the Philippines. That is why the world should be paying attention to the Indo-Pacific right now, not just to what is happening in the Middle East. Let me leave you with this thought. In 1945, Japanese and Filipino soldiers were killing each other in the ruins of Manila. The city was burning. The death toll was catastrophic. No one standing in those ruins could have imagined a world where Japanese combat troops would return to the Philippines as allies, not to fight Filipinos, but to stand beside them. And yet, here we are. History has a way of making the unthinkable become inevitable when the threat is real enough. The Indo-Pacific in 2026 is not the calm, distant theater that most people imagine. It is 4 global maritime choke points under simultaneous stress. It is aircraft carriers pushing past island chains. It is Tomahawk missiles positioned within range of the Chinese mainland. It is the biggest military exercise in history about to begin in 14 days. And at the center of it all, 2 former enemies, standing shoulder to shoulder. Because they looked at the world and decided, the past is painful, but the future is more dangerous. That is the story no one else is telling you, and that is why you are here. If you want to stay informed, subscribe, hit the bell, share this video, and I will see you in the next one.